Welcome to another edition of Grandstanders Live. I'm your host, Scott Kerman, and I'm joined by my usual cohorts, the Professor, Russ Stevens, Uncle Joe McLaughlin, and JP's first son, Tim Hoey, will be joining us very soon. Well, we have a special guest here on Zoom. It's his 6th annual appearance, and it's always our favorite show. I think the boys would agree.
100%. Yeah.
Governor Michael Dukakis of the great state of Massachusetts and the 1988 Democratic nominee for President of the United States. Again, it's my pleasure to welcome to you our friend, Governor Michael Dukakis. Thank you for being on, Governor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
First, to find out what's
Welcome
going on
aboard.
in the post office. What's going on in the post office? Are we going to have those?
Oh my gosh, I know. This is, there's a lot of shenanigans that seem to be going on, Governor. A lot of shenanigans.
All right,
Really?
tell us. Yeah,
Trump wants to finagle something going on here.
Let me tell
Joe,
you, steal this election if he can. You know, I mean, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of policing.
Joe, do you actually,
Okay, so-
Joe, do you see anything at the ground level yet in terms of what's going on?
Well, that's all we're doing right now is the Massachusetts primary is a huge deal right now, especially that congressional race in Scotty's district and the governor's district.
Right.
I mean, that's incredible. 9 candidates and it's amazing how many people are opting to vote by mail. It's we're being swamped with going both ways.
You know, I mean, if you don't want to put your life at risk, you vote by mail, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
That's what I think going on.
All right, Governor, breaking
Not
news.
by mail, because we're in the high-risk 80s group, and, you know, she'll be 84 in December, I'll be 87 in November, and we've been told, I've been told I cannot teach in a classroom for the next year.
Brookline has closed quite a few polling places that were in high-risk places because,
Right.
that
No,
like
that's-
190 Harvard and 61 Park. And so now everyone has to go to the high school.
Yeah.
All right, Governor, your thoughts on, of course, the breaking news from yesterday that Joe Biden names Kamala Harris as his vice president nominee. What was your reaction when you first heard the news?
That's a good pick.
Good pick.
I have not we call it distant relationship, but her brother-in-law, wonderful guy, went to Harvard, and he was an intern. Tony West, her soon-to-be future I'm not losing it anyway, who married her sister, her brother-in-law was at Harvard and was an intern in my governor's office and subsequently went to work for me during the presidential campaign. I mean, worked.
Right.
Wonderful guy. Wonderful. And then went to Stanford Law School, was, I think, president of the Law Review, and was the #3 guy in the Obama Justice Department. Tony West. And we were at his wedding. With Myrna. So I assume Kamala was there, but
Yeah.
I don't remember her. But you know, it's an interesting family, an interesting mix of
Sure.
folks. And I thought she was really quite eloquent this evening. I mean, I listened to her speech, and it was.
So it came between.
It's not going to be easy, let me tell you. I mean, my view, Trump will do everything he can to steal this election. And he's already done it.
Joe Biden.
I mean, he votes absentee.
Right.
His vote absentee, but he doesn't want the folks in Nevada to vote absentee. The whole thing.
Yeah. Right.
In the meantime, where's baseball? Where's all the stuff we have fun talking about?
Oh, I know.
All right. All right. We had to. So Joe Biden ran against you in 1988. Tell me what your thoughts of Joe Biden is.
I like him, always have. I think he's a good guy. I thought he was an excellent vice president. He and Obama obviously had a very close and a very good working relationship. And that should have a lot to do with what should be a similar relationship that he has with Kamala. And my sense is that's already beginning. Although I was not aware of how close she and his sons Beau were.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it turns out that they were very close, used to talk every day. They were both attorneys general, obviously.
Sure.
She had enormous respect for Beau, and apparently that relationship was a very close one. And then he got a brain tumor, and that was
right. Governor, can I ask you a question about choosing a VP nominee? You know, you've got different dimensions. One is the electoral college and the geographic dimension. The other is who's just the best person for the job. The other is who would work with you best as a teammate. The other is their charisma and other characteristics. You know, how did you weigh that going into that decision in 1988?
I obviously made some mistakes in 88. One of the things that I did well, I think, was picking a running mate. And we started with literally dozens of candidates. I narrowed it down to 4, and you recognize all of the names. Any one of them would have been a very good running mate. And I've said this many times, but you can talk about geography, you can talk about personality, you can talk about a lot of things. The single most important factor, in my opinion, in picking a running mate is the question, can he or she be a first-rate president if God forbid something happens to you?
Right, right.
And I picked Lloyd Bentsen, and I think I picked well under the circumstances. In fact, if I'd done a better job myself, he could have made the difference.
Now,
but I think that's very important. Geography is important, personality is important, and so on and so forth.
Can I pipe in here for 1 second?
Sure.
Sure. Governor, you say it's the most important thing. Are they going to make a good president? That's what you would like to really believe. But do you think that is generally the case, that is how people pick their running mates for vice president? Or do you think in reality, people pick it to get the votes?
It depends. Was Dan Quayle a guy qualified to be president of the United States?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
That's not why Bush picked him. I'm not quite sure why Bush picked him.
The gal from Alaska, you know?
Yeah, same thing. Same thing.
Now
Lloyd Bentsen had been a first-rate president if God forbid something happened to me, no question about it. No question about it. Now the fact that he came from Texas, well, was helpful.
Get a few of those Texas votes.
But the first consideration, and I'm serious about this, has to be, can that person be a first-rate president if nothing happens to you? And I think the answer to that question when it comes to Kamala is yes. And I think wasn't a huge fan of Bush Senior. I thought he was a very good foreign policy president, not a very good domestic president. Now, I guess people agree with me because that's why he was not reelected. But he was a very good foreign policy president. And he and Gorbachev basically negotiated the end of the Cold War, which is now, I'm sorry to say, beginning to return. Can you believe this, folks? Can you believe we're going back into a Cold War?
I had to.
Us in China. What's the matter with us? I mean, look, China will be a democracy maybe in 75 years. But in the meantime, they're an important country. They're a powerful country. And I think it's important that we get along. Now what do we got? We got a situation where the Chinese are messing around with our election because they don't want Trump reelected. And the Russians are messing around with the election because they want Trump reelected. What is this?
And nobody should be messing around with our election at all.
Exactly. And why are we permitting it? In point of fact, maybe we've talked about this in previous programs, I don't remember. But, I mean, adopting digitized voting system is crazy.
Yeah.
Look, you guys aren't old enough to remember the old voting machines, are you? Did you ever vote in the voting machine?
Oh, yeah. I remember the voting machine.
Absolutely, sure.
You walked in, you remember, and then you flip the curtain, and then you
Yeah,
went down the line.
Everything
Levers.
slotted down. Yep.
I mean, automatically recorded. It was not digital, so you could interfere with it.
No hanging chads.
Huh?
No hanging chads.
Yeah, right.
And you were in and out of that process in a matter of minutes. I mean, we had the count by 9 o'clock.
Right. That's
Why
true.
did we ever go to this computerized system, which is so easily invaded? It's crazy.
Oh my God.
So,
Okay, so I had to ask you, so I go on Wikipedia a few days ago because it seemed it was between Kamala Harris and Susan Rice. And Susan Rice, it seemed, was an advisor to you in 1988, is that right?
I think I'm trying to think, she certainly was involved and worked closely with Madeleine Albright, who was my key foreign policy person
Okay.
in that campaign. And she's very good.
Yeah.
Now, does she have the kind of political experience that Kamala has? Well, obviously not in that sense, but she certainly has been involved in public life for a long time. She would have been a good pick. I don't have any question about it.
Yeah.
But I think this was an excellent pick.
Well, the biggest hot topic issue, it seems, right now as we speak, and it's a huge issue in Brookline. So, of course, I have to ask you, is about the whole school reopening across the country and here locally. What's your viewpoint about schools reopening?
I don't see how you can open the schools. Not as long as you have this threat.
Unless you got 5 kids running around the house, Governor, then you'd.
It's a problem, no question.
I
about it.
know.
And we should be doing everything we can to try to somehow give those kids a reasonably decent education, even in the course of this thing. But the reality is that's going to be extremely difficult, and all we need is a flare-up. In this community, that community, some other community, everybody's going to go crazy. So I think
It's almost like we have to put the world on hold for a year and a half to get this thing straightened out.
You think so?
I don't know. I mean, I
Look, we need
there's so many things to do.
We need strong national leadership, which will end this. Can I mention Greece? I'm kind of close.
Yes, please do.
They have 11 million people. I think they may have slightly more than 200 fatalities. Now, why is that? Because we've got a new prime minister who, by the way, was at the top of his class at Harvard across the river as an undergraduate. Came back and went to the business school. Is a very impressive guy, and who can manage. Picked the 2 best public health people in Greece and said, "You're in charge. Go to work." And they did, and they have. And they've had slightly more than, I think, 200 fatalities. 200 out of 11 million.
Well, if Joe Biden becomes president, I want him to, and I've said this to Adrian, I said, I think Governor Michael Dukakis should be the ambassador to Greece. I'm not joking. Why not, right?
I remember, who was it? There was somebody who was a prominent guy in politics who was being talked about as ambassador to the Court of St. James, right? London, England.
Right.
And he said, it might have been Mondale, I can't remember. And I think he said, I pay for my own vacation. But he ended up.
Governor, do those ambassadorships come with the retirement package?
Say again?
Do they come with the pension? You do a couple of years as a ambassador. Does that come with a pension? See, I'm from Jamaica Plain. That's how we look at every piece of work. You know?
Yeah, right.
Is there a pension at the end?
I think it is interesting that little Greece with 11 million people has a little more than 200
It's yeah.
folks who've lost their lives. And it's because they have very strong leadership and they haven't been fooling around.
Yeah.
And what have we got? Have we got a national program? Do we have any program? Is there a national effort to deal with this? Not that I can see. I mean,
So, Governor, I have I think the last time you were on, or a couple times ago, you had, we were talking about nicknames for President Trump, and you had a particularly good one. I have an ad idea that connects to sports because there's a whole thing about college football is canceling, their season. So if I were the Democrats or maybe the Lincoln Project, I'd buy all sorts of time on Saturday and say, if our country had done as well as Italy or Greece, we'd all be watching college football right now.
Ooh, that'll get the Southerners to wear their masks.
Just blanket the airwaves, because you're right. If you take a look at all the curves in those countries, Italy and Greece, countries that we think of as having unstable governments or public systems that have been socialized, right? And you look at the curves in those countries, and they go up and they come down and they've stayed down. And
yeah. No, it's really. And this country has always had one of the best public health systems in the country.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for this.
No.
You got a guy in the White House who says it's a hoax.
Right.
It's a hoax. The whole thing's a hoax. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's acted like that ever since. And now he says, well, it's going to end at some point. Yeah. Well, we're headed for 200,000 deaths.
Yeah.
And it's really just disgraceful, it seems to me.
Well, Governor Dukakis, we're obviously a sports show, and a great example of how it can work right now is the NBA and the NHL. They went into a bubble. Everybody went there. They sequestered themselves in a small area. They did everything right, and there hasn't been one positive case now in over a month. That shows you can do it right in this country if you do all the right things.
I think size is an issue, though. Can the NFL do it
without doing the bubble, right?
I mean, that's going to be very tough in a system in a sport where constant contact is part of the game. So I don't know. But I tend to be very conservative when it comes to doing this.
Okay,
Governor, did you ever deal with in your time, did you ever deal with any sort of a virus or pandemic or some sort of public health crisis like this that required?
The closest I came to this was the blizzard of '78.
The blizzard, I was going to say, right? Yeah.
But that's not like
a
pandemic.
That was one of the most fun weeks of my life.
For all of us, except for the governor.
That's for me. And wonderful story. My favorite story about the blizzard of '78 involved a National Guardsman who was patrolling I-93 north of Boston. And of course, we had banned all traffic and that kind of stuff. And here comes this guy driving down 93 from his house in Burlington to go to work, I think, in Cambridge, at one of the high-tech companies. So the National Guard guy pulls him over and says, "What are you doing here?" He said, I feel embarrassed, but I was getting stir crazy in the house. I couldn't take it, and I just had to get in the car and come to work. So the National Guardsman said, "Get out of the car. Lock the car. Put your keys in your pocket. Where do you live?" "Burlington." "Turn around and start heading back to Burlington." And then he said, and he took a few steps, and then he said, "Wait a second." He took out a piece of paper and he wrote something on it and gave it to me. He said, "When you get back to Burlington, read this." Anyway, and the car was left on the highway. Guy feels, embarrassed, so on and so forth, and starts walking. And for 5 or 10 minutes, reaches into his pocket and takes out a piece of paper. And this National Guardsman had written on the piece of paper, "This man is mentally incompetent." I guess he made it. But, lots and lots of stories from the 78, but you know, that's nothing compared to what we
Yeah, no. Yeah.
My story from 78 is all the National Guard guys came to drink in the local bar and hung all of their heavy duty National Guard winter clothes up. And 2 weeks later, everyone in my neighborhood was wearing National Guard winter clothing.
You know, that was a day, and you know, a week, and if I had extended it beyond 7 days, I'd have been impeached.
Yeah.
This is very serious stuff. But
you had a shelter in place. That was,
you know,
it was a shelter in place order at that time.
Say again.
So you had a shelter in place order for how long during the blizzard of 78?
I just said no traffic. No
Yeah.
crime, no nothing for a week.
Yeah, you couldn't if you wanted anyways. The streets were, you couldn't go anywhere.
Well, no, but you know, I mean, when you bar traffic, you can clear the, and the folks in central and western Massachusetts started getting annoyed because they said it wasn't as bad out here and we ought to be able to come back and so on and so forth. I just basically said, hey, it's going to be statewide for a week and then we'll have you back. In the meantime, by the way, I'm proud to say the T was carrying twice double the number of people who normally carry,
Right.
and it never
Right.
stopped.
Yeah.
It never stopped.
That's right. The T never stopped. I mean, to show you all the times in the last decade where the T is very much stopped.
Don't get me started.
Oh, don't get right.
I was at the Beanpot that night.
You know, we should
Were you
have
really?
the best transit system in America here. And
I
think
know.
when I left office, we did, but for our fourth CEO, you know, Charlie's a decent guy. I don't know what his problem is when it comes to running the T.
Yeah.
His fourth CEO. And this is a state with good managers and good people. No excuse for this.
All right, so we have to do some sports. In the last year, so since then, we'll start with the Red Sox, a guy named Mookie Betts. Governor Dukakis, how can the Boston Red Sox, one of the storied franchises in this country, they print money, how can they let a star in his prime leave over a couple of dollars?
I don't know. I don't understand. You
It's
know,
unconscionable.
he was not only a great ball player, I think he was really on his way to beating people up by fans here. There was something about Mookie that was just really quite special. And
Can you imagine them doing the same thing to Ted Williams in his prime?
No.
Homegrown player comes up through the system, underdog, tough, very tough.
Part of a generation of homegrown players, to the credit of the club.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
To the credit of the club.
That's exactly right. Although I would say the Achilles heel that we've had is developing pitchers. We just have not had much luck at drafting and developing our own pitchers.
You guys know more about this game than I do. Why not the kind of pitcher development you think?
It's a great question. You know, it's one of two things or a combination of both. You're drafting the wrong guys, or the guys you're drafting you're not developing. You know, or you're
trading them to somebody else
or you're trading them to somebody else. Yeah.
But early on in the early 2000s, in the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006, we were developing guys like Lester and Papelbon, and the whole thing was, Governor Dukakis, is that we could develop pitchers, but we couldn't develop hitters. Yeah. And then they kind of turned around, started concentrating in the drafts, and then all of a sudden you get the Bogarts and the Devers of the world, and next thing you know, you haven't developed a good pitcher since John Lester.
But there was a fair amount of trading of potentially good pitchers, wasn't there?
Yeah.
What's of all of this?
Yes, definitely, and they're
rare commodities. I mean, you
really hard.
You don't want to get rid of folks that potentially could be great pitchers. Seems to me, to make a trade with somebody who may be very helpful this year, but who knows what happens next year? I don't know. I don't understand it, but it's troubling.
Is it sacrilegious to say that the Red Sox right now are tanking, that they're deliberately trying to lose to benefit themselves as far as draft picks? And we haven't seen that around here in a long time.
Yeah. Well, it's not that I'm not following them, but I'm not following them. I can't seem to figure out where they're going, what they're doing, and what's the problem here? Is it just lack of talent, or is it? I mean, what is it? I don't know. But it's certainly troubling. I mean,
if there was ever a good year to tank, this was the year to tank. And Scotty, so I think if they are tanking, they picked the perfect circumstances to tank in.
Right.
Because I don't think anyone's paying attention, like the governor said. Governor, I would expect this is probably the least you've paid attention to baseball in years. Am I right?
Yeah. You're right. But it's troubling in a town like this where that's the game.
Right.
And for guys like me, I mean, with all due respect to the other professional athletes, and we've got them, and they're good. But I'm still a Red Sox fan.
Well, not right now. It's hard. You know, that they played a game the other night. It was a 9-inning game. It was 4 hours and 24 minutes long in a 9-inning game because they're going with relief pitchers, a bunch of relief pitchers, one after another, and over the course of 7-8 innings,
right?
And it just gets it's very difficult to watch, and you just don't know these guys.
Would you stay, Governor Dukakis, if you were at the Red Sox game for 4 hours and 24 minutes, would you stay the whole game? Governor,
I'd probably stay the whole game.
You are a strong man.
What can I tell you? I mean, I just
you love the game. Yeah, you love the game.
I love playing as a kid.
Yeah.
And I say to folks, hey, if you're going to go to a baseball game, plan to stick around. No, you're not going to be out of there in 2 hours.
That's for sure.
So enjoy it, watch it, and savor it. But
so are you watching the Celtics play at all? I mean, out of all the sports, it seems like the NBA has got it right. They seem to be handling this pandemic better than. And I admire them for it. I got to tell you, it doesn't have the same appeal to me. The Red Sox. Right.
Oh, we got to give the NHL a little credit there too, Scott.
The NHL is doing very well too.
Well, I mean, just the fact that going back to Scott, something you said, there have been no positive tests in either the NHL or the NBA over the last 3 weeks, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of players and coaches.
No, it's really not that hard if you put your mind to it to not catch this stuff. I mean, if you take your precautions, it's not that hard.
I think you're right, Tim. They just basically said, well, they had an advantage that baseball didn't have. Baseball to start a season and to finish a season in a bubble is a lot to ask of these athletes. But with the NHL and the NBA, you really only had a handful of regular season games and then the playoffs. But I think they took it seriously, and in this notion of not going out and staying in the bubble and really limiting the interaction, it's really remarkable. I would never have guessed that they'd have 0 positive tests after a month.
Since this started, the job I have to be out every day and going places and doing things.
Yeah,
I wear gloves. I wear a mask. I use hand sanitizer. I wash my hands.
Yeah.
Just do the basics, and you're not going to get it.
Great point, Tim.
Do you guys understand what this revolt against this is all about? 250,000 guys with motorcycles in South Dakota. What is this all about?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a serious, serious disease that kills people.
Why is everything politicized now, Governor? Why is everything politicized? Why are masks a political hot topic?
I don't understand it. I just don't understand it.
Well, I think they take their cues from leadership. And look, I think the president had an opportunity at the beginning of this to not rectify his image, but to to certainly start to change people's minds. If he had said from the beginning and taken it seriously and said, we're all wearing masks, we're going to stay shut down until we get past this spike, and we're all going to, do things to protect each other during this crisis.
And gradually get back to normal.
Exactly. He had an opportunity and he just didn't take it. And for the life of me, I don't understand why instead, Scott, to your point, he politicized it from day one and refused to wear a mask himself.
I mean, how can you call this a hoax?
I guarantee you that Governor Dukakis would have worn a mask on day one of a crisis like this to show everybody that the thing that you have to do is wear a mask. Timmy, you wear
dozens and dozens of governors who have done so.
Absolutely.
I've been, and I've had people come up to me and say, "Take that foolish mask off." I can't believe it when they say it. You know what? Just breathe. Take it off so you can breathe. I look at them
what
like.
What do you say to them?
Timmy, what do you say to them when they say that to you?
I say, I value my health and I value my mother's health, who's 84 years old.
That's right. Yeah.
Does that stop them a little bit? Do they?
Well, look,
respond to that?
but masks are nothing new. When you go into any hospital, and I go into Dana-Farber all the time, if they say, if you have any kind of fever, cough, sneeze, or stuff, please put on a mask. And of course, everyone obliges and they're happy to do it. This isn't an original idea of the public wearing masks in certain situations. I just can't, it's unbelievable to me.
I think if somebody said everybody wore masks, this thing would go away in 6 weeks. I don't know if that's true or not, but.
So how, Governor Dukakis, how is your life changed, your and Kitty's life? Do you go for walks? Are you spending pretty much all the time in the house? How has your life changed in the last 5 months?
Well, it was complicated because of what happened to me when I was out at UCLA in the winter.
Right.
Because I got this cough, which turned into pneumonia. And even though the air quality in Los Angeles is a million times better than it used to be. I mean, I don't know whether you guys went around.
Yeah, I lived out there. Yeah.
I remember going to the 1960 Democratic Convention when Kennedy was nominated. And it was like living in a toxic stew. I mean, your eyes burned and teared and, a great city, but you couldn't wait to get out of it. Right. It was for us Kennedy fans, a very good convention. I mean, and a successful one. But it was awful, just terrible. And today, the air quality in Southern California is really very, very good. But it does have apparently these particulars, which are still flying around, and will affect some people with coughs and cold. And that's happened to be every year that we've gone out there. Okay, fine. So, I coughed for 3 or 4 weeks, but it didn't interfere with my teaching or that kind of stuff. This year, for some reason, it continued. And I finally had to go into the hospital with this cough. It had nothing to do with pandemic or any of this kind of stuff. Was there for about 10 days. They hit me with antibiotics. I get out. And it was the day before we were supposed to come back to Boston. And I guess I started acting kind of funny. Fortunately, our son was with us at the time. And he picked up the phone and called the doctor back here, who said, take him to the hospital immediately.
Yeah.
And I was in the hospital for another week and was operated on.
Wow.
For brain abscesses, if you can believe it. Fortunately, and one of the docs was nice enough to call me and say, you're going to be perfect, don't worry.
Oh, that's great.
But then I feel fine, but it was pretty scary.
Sure it was. And then you
again,
came back.
Nothing to do with the virus.
With the virus, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Scott, could I ask another political question? I just got to take the opportunity.
Sure.
So, Governor, back in 2016, you very prophetically said that the key to that election was going to be running 50 states, that she needed to run in 50 states. And
Yeah.
ground operation and get that vote out. And you turned out she skipped 3 states that she shouldn't have. As you look at this election, do you say it's essentially the same fundamentals, that it's about 50 states and getting out the vote, or are the dynamics different?
The answer is yes, but the dynamics are just so different. I mean, how do you go up to somebody and knock on their door?
Right.
You stand on the sidewalk and yell or something. It's just so different. I don't remember ever being involved in anything quite like this.
Yeah.
So you've got to find other ways to do it. And that's especially important for the Democrats because turnout is going to be very, very important.
Yeah.
And it's obvious that Trump is doing everything he can to depress turnout in Democratic leaning states. So you got to deal with it in that way, but this is just so different from anything we've ever had to deal with.
It's remarkable.
50 states, every precinct, you've heard me say this. Can't do it this time.
Yeah.
It was clear that you had become the nominee, and before the convention, how much of your time was spent fundraising?
Not a great deal, interesting you know. No, we did fundraising, but we were not raising the kind of money these folks are raising.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how much.
300 million.
Huh? I mean, whatever it is.
Yeah. The governor was
and most of it was grassroots stuff and relatively small contributions. And we had we there were restrictions on what you could do and what you couldn't do, and we followed them very carefully. Now it's especially with that Supreme Court decision, there are no restrictions on how much you can raise.
God, I had the pleasure of actually working for the governor's fundraising operation in 1988, and if I remember correctly, you leveled the playing field as much as a Democrat had ever up until that point leveled the playing field in terms of fundraising. It was the first time the Democrats went toe to toe with the Republicans and I think in a long time, right?
Yeah. So my favorite, a lot of favorites, but my favorite was listening to too many people who said to me, well, this precinct-based grassroots organizing, that's okay if you run for city council, but not when you're running for the president.
Yeah, right.
States. And I listened to them. They had a mistake. It took Barack Obama to prove that precinct-based grassroots organizing works in presidential campaign.
Yeah.
And I just didn't do that, unfortunately.
I know it's tough to pick one topic or one issue, but what do you think the most important issue of this 2020 election is?
Coming up, this election?
Yeah.
Well, immediately, it's dealing with the pandemic.
Right.
Right away, decisively and effectively, and showing results. And it's got to be at the top of the agenda. And then secondly, and this I don't think should be that difficult if you deal with the public health problem, is getting the economy back. But I think you can do that if you look at these other countries, how their economy is doing. Doing quite well.
Right.
You can't have the economy until you deal with the coronavirus. I mean,
that's right.
Great point, Tim. That's a great point, Tim.
You're not going to get your job back till you quit drinking if you're a drunk. It's kind of the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
No question. You've got to solve this problem right away. And you've got to mobilize people. You've got to use the authority of the federal government, as you know. It's extensive if you want to use it. And
So nothing really happens until we deal with the virus situation.
Yeah. And
everything else is.
I don't understand. I don't know Trump. I don't understand him. He was actually had good things to say about me in 1988. Believe it or not. Okay, but he's like
He must have needed a loan.
I like this guy exactly. But I don't think I've ever met him. But I don't understand the guy, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But why would you think that this was your single most important priority?
Totally.
Especially if you care about the economy. Because you're never going to get the economy moving again unless you solve the problem.
Well, we know he cares about only one person, Donald Trump, and getting reelected, and this would have probably got him reelected.
Sadly, that seems to be the case. I don't
I
understand.
think you're right. I think you're right, Scott. Yeah.
Doesn't he understand that this is so central to everything that we have to do here? That we can't do it. Look at these other countries. What's our problem? I mean, it's embarrassing.
It was almost like trying to stick his head in the sand, and it was just going to go away.
But
you know,
it's not realistic. It's not going to happen.
I know. Scientists were saying different.
This is a pandemic. You know, it's what do the docs keep saying? The disease doesn't care about.
Right.
Governor, it seems like people
they care about
serious until it hits them personally. That's been my view of it. A lot of people I know didn't take this thing seriously until someone they knew intimately either passed away or got very sick from this. And that's when it really hit home.
Yeah, I guess. But why should it take that to do this? I mean, come on, we've got a great public health tradition in this country. And we got a guy in the White House who just won't listen to these people. Yeah. I mean, I think Tony Fauci is, by the way, graduate of Holy Cross College. You know that.
I know. How about that? It's
interesting.
We should be proud of him.
He was a 5'6" shortstop for his high school baseball.
He was an undersized athlete as well.
Yeah, a big time.
Did you know Dr. Fauci at all? Did you have any dealings with him?
Say again? No, I'm not. I don't think so. I have a vague connection because, let's see if I can explain this. My daughter is married to a guy who is very close to a guy who's married to Fauci's sister.
There you go.
Okay. They're almost like related.
Interesting way.
Yeah.
But I think he's an extraordinary human being.
He sure is.
Tells it like it is. And why wouldn't you listen to him?
It's one of the great mysteries in all of this.
Dr. Fauci's been around forever with the greatest reputation in Washington, D.C. That's why this is such a joke. It's
really crazy, isn't it?
So
anyway,
I have to
let's hope that the voters do the right thing and we get ourselves some.
So I would be remiss to ask you what your feeling is about the police. I mean, obviously, this has been a huge topic. Defunding the police, police reform. What's your feeling of you've dealt with police, the state police, the local police, your whole career. What is your feeling in general about how police go about their business?
Let's put the Massachusetts State Police and at least one unit of it to the side because I don't understand. I can't imagine that happening when I was young. Now that Charlie Barry's the Secretary of Public Safety, I just can't imagine this. I don't understand what is going on here. But overall, and it's important for people to understand this, community policing in Boston and in Massachusetts has been transformed over the last 20 or 30 years,
right?
Without a doubt. It's a whole different, it's professional. It's led by very good people, including the current commissioner in Boston. And it's one of the reasons why, and I'm not sure you guys know this, I'm not sure a lot of people know this. You know, Massachusetts has the lowest homicide rate in America. Are you aware of this?
I did not know that.
Nobody knows it, even in Massachusetts. The lowest homicide rate in America.
Wow.
In Massachusetts. And Boston has one of the lowest of any of the major cities. That's something we ought to be proud of. We ought to talk about it. Now, why? Because, remember, Northeastern, if I may say, was one of the first universities in the country to have a major in law enforcement and criminal justice. The professionalization of the police began here before it happened in most other parts of the country. And I work with these guys. they were in many cases second-generation police officers. They came out of policing families, but they all went to college. They came out of that educational background with good skills, and they were a joy to work with, a joy to work with. And it's one of the reasons why we have about 50 homicides a year in Boston. 50 too many, but 50, 50.
Wow.
Because of intensive community policing. Bill Bratton was one of them, but there were others. And I was in Los Angeles during the winter when Bratton was out there for 7.5 years, transformed the relationship between the people of Los Angeles and the LAPD. Transformed that relationship. Then went back to New York, as you know. We don't, for some reason, don't seem to know this. Maybe folks like me should be talking more about it. It's really made a huge difference. And I see it in my local police here in Brookline. I see it in Boston. I see it in terms of how our police officers these days work and function. And we should be proud of it. I'm not for defunding the police. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think people even know what the word defund is. I don't think.
We need well-trained, well-financed, well-supported police.
Yeah, I mean, I think this definitely needs to
doing
be.
it in a way which is compassionate, responsible, sensitive, and treats people well. But it's the idea that you can somehow get rid of the police is crazy, in my opinion.
It's absolutely. So we just have a.
Boston is a very good example of where modern, concerned, compassionate, but effective policing has been happening now for several years under good mayors who picked good police commissioners, and we're lucky to have them. But you guys didn't know we had the lowest homicide rate in America, did you?
No.
Why are we saying that?
I'm proud of our Boston police force. A lot of my friends are on there, and I think they do a great job.
Boston, but Somerville, I mean, that, generally speaking, policing is highly professional now. It's done well, and nobody's talking about that.
You have to notice that Boston has typically not had the problems that a lot of other cities have had.
Interesting, isn't it? Interesting. Yeah.
We have to hats off to them for that.
It hasn't. It hasn't.
But would you give Menino credit for that? He seemed to have a great.
I think it's a series of mayors.
Yeah.
I mean, Tommy Menino was mayor for what, 20 years, but he had others both before him and after him, all of whom shared this commitment to genuine community policing. And in point of fact, if it's done right, it works.
Okay, we got 1 minute left, so I have to ask you, Governor Dukakis, who's gonna? Will Joe Biden be the next president of the United States, or will Donald Trump be reelected?
I think Biden and Harris will be elected, but I don't trust Trump as far as I can throw him. I think he will do everything he can to steal this election, in every way he can. I mean, the guy is a little off,
He sure is. Yeah, that's you. You could
more than a little
be any
off.
nicer than that.
Gonna be a year, that's for sure.
I mean,
Well, I can't thank you enough for being on this show.
great to
Thank
do you
you.
guys, and I hope next year we'll be back talking about
Sports, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Games that we've been to.
in a country that's
If you
getting
think-
its act back together again.
Well, the Bruins won today anyways.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
it's a good
there'll
day.
be happier times soon. I know it. So I want to thank, of course, Governor Dukakis for being on the show, and of course, hello to Kitty Dukakis, who we loved seeing the last 2 years, and send her our love. I want to thank, of course, the boys for the show, and everyone behind the scenes, of course, Corbin. Please check us out on our website at thegrandstanders.com, and tune in again next Wednesday night at 6:30 for another edition of Grandstanders Live. I'm your host, Scott Kerman. Have a great and happy night.